People ask me all the time, like, aren't you afraid that like your business will fail? And my response to that is no. I'm deathly afraid of not ever trying. I'm deathly afraid of getting to the end of my life and going, what did I actually do? That is much riskier to me than failing, because what is failure really? I don't have money to be able to buy the car to impress the people that, aren't even really worried about me. No, I'm definitely afraid of not trying. Howdy, everybody. We are not live for this AMA show because honestly, whether we're live or not, the value is still the same. So rather than trying to go live and getting you guys to come to us, we're going to come to you. We're going to come to you whenever you feel like it through the AMA show for the Next Better podcast. As always, I am Coach Woody, and with me, Kristin Rinkel. Wonderful to have you. How are you today in the sunny Colorado?
Doing pretty great. The sunrise was beautiful today, so I am very happy. And I got to sit outside, eat it, hit legs today, grocery shopping, got gas. Yeah, ready to go today.
All the fun stuff that nobody ever talks about being fun. But as Dr. Humerman says, I know he's a frequent listener of this podcast. I am also joking, but he talks about getting light in your eyeballs as soon as you possibly can. So it sounds like you did that. Good for you. Good for you. So today we're switching up a little bit. We're going to go a little bit shorter content. So we're going to power through 2 or 3 questions and do a little bit more of a 30-minute AMA show to give people a little bit more compact content that they can still appreciate. And so, as always, we're talking about the 8 different areas of our life that we can improve. If you don't know what those are, if you've never listened before, or if you're just listening for the first time and don't actually pay attention, you are much like my college students that are in my class, and that's okay. I'll say it over and over and over and over again until you get it. The 8 areas of your life that you can improve are your physical, your spiritual, and your mental. Those are the 3 inside ones. The internal aspects of our wellness. We have our vocational, what we do with our time, material, what we have, and social, who we do it with. And so those are the 3 external. Then you have the broad external aspect of your social or your spiritual, your spatial wellness, 3rd time's a charm. Your spatial wellness, which is all the areas that you live in and how well they support your wellness. And in the middle, the piece that a lot of people don't have, the piece that is unique to the model that I have created for our well-being, is our directional. What's my purpose in life? And what are the values that I live by to fulfill that purpose? And it is those 8 things that we talk about on this show each and every time. And so today we're going to touch on 2 or 3 of those topics. My job is to help tie them back into that wellness metric of what that model that we have can help us with. And then it's your job to go out and apply it to whatever parts of your life that you want to. So I'm excited about it. Kristin, what are we talking about today?
Kind of 2 themes on balancing stability and taking risks, and then strategies to build strong relationships, put it simply.
I love it. I love it. So strategies upon strategies. That's the work that I do. I am a fractional chief strategic officer is one title that I wear amongst others, like being a Cub Scout leader. And so those are really good conversations to have. For those of you who maybe don't listen in all that much or just don't know this about me, I actually teach entrepreneurship at Purdue. And so some of the questions we have coming today are actually synopses of conversations that I've had with people already these last couple of weeks. And I realized, oh, wow, I bet a lot of other people would like to know the answers to these questions. So entrepreneurship is one of those areas where we spend a lot of time trying to determine how much risk we're willing to take versus how much stability we'd like out of our life, and how do you balance that. And the truth of the matter, spoiler alert to everybody out there, is there is no such thing as true stability, and there's no such thing as complete risk, right? It's a balancing act. It's a scale that we're constantly trying to find. So excited to talk about that one and dive into that one a little bit. And then strategies for networking, I think, is going to be huge. How do we make meaningful connections? That's that social piece, right? And when we think of social, we always think of our friends, but that's just not true. Social is relationships, 2 people coming together for a common cause. So it's important to be intentional. I'm excited to unpack that as well. So the first one, risk versus stability. That's really a directional part of our life because we can apply that in so many ways, right? Risk with our friends and our family, risk with our job, risk with our physical health. Exercise turns out is a risk. If you lift really, really heavy things a lot, you might get hurt. And if you don't lift heavy things a lot, you will probably most likely get hurt because you're going to be untrained and end up falling and breaking a hip. So you get to choose your risk, right? What's that meme, Kristen, that's going around like exercise sucks, being unhealthy sucks, choose your suck, right? And going around there. So that's kind of the conversation we're having. So that risk versus stability piece can be applied to almost every aspect of our life in all 8 of those different areas. So looking forward to that for sure.
Yes, yeah. So to have you dive deeper into that
Yes.
question, this anonymous question here is saying, I often feel pulled between wanting stability and wanting to take risks.
Hmm.
How do you help people find balance between the two? I'm guessing, I mean, this can be probably personal or professional life that somebody is wanting stability or taking risk.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the common place that we see this playing out more is in your career, right? And so for everybody who has been listening thus far, vocational is the dimension that I talk about, not occupational. Occupational is what you do to make money, right? Vocational is what you do with your time. It's your calling. Okay. And you might do that to make money. You might also do that with volunteering. There's tons of ways that you can spend your time, and the value you get from that can be different in a lot of different ways. So I just want to put that up there right off the front is what we're talking about here is what you do with your time. How you make money may be very, very different. You might get into investments, and that those investments can make passive income, and then you're not doing anything and you're making money. And that's wonderful. Everybody kind of wants to go that way. But what we're talking about here is what we do with our time, our vocation. And often that is also what we trade for dollars. And so a lot of times I have conversations with people about taking a risk. And when they say taking risks, they talk about starting their own business, right? That's a really common example in this situation. So how do I know it's right to start a business versus stay in the path and everywhere in between? And so there's a lot of aspects that go into this. Okay. So I'm not going to pretend to sit here and be like, well, you have to take risks because risks is the only way to reward and blah blah blah. There's a lot of people out there that have that guru. If you want that mentality, go listen to David Goggins, right? I'm not your guy, right? And so my belief is that you really truly have to assess what it is that you're willing to risk and what it is that you're not willing to risk. And too many of us don't do that. My tolerance for risk drastically changed about 6 years ago. And that was the year that my son was born. And that was when I recognized that I was unwilling to take a risk that may put us in a place where I can't provide for my son and for my family. When it's just me and my wife was pretty flexible in terms of like, hey, go try it out. She's always been very open and honest. And so you have to be able and willing to understand where your risk tolerance is and what you're capable of doing and not doing. And so I think that's a really important piece that a lot of people are missing that needs to be a lot clearer. The other piece of this is to understand what truly is risky versus not risky. People ask me all the time, like, aren't you afraid that like your business will fail? And my response to that is no. I'm deathly afraid of not ever trying. I'm deathly afraid of getting to the end of my life and going, what did I actually do? That is much riskier to me than because what is failure really? I don't have money to be able to buy the car to impress the people that aren't even really worried about me. No, I'm definitely afraid of not trying. And that's a mentality. That's something that I've accrued over time, but that's the risk that I see myself taking that I'm not willing to take. Now, I have a lot of people may not know this. I've always had like a quote unquote job, a W 2 or whatever, along with the other things that I'm doing. Right now, I work for a university. I have 2 businesses that I work with. I'm currently working to maybe put together something like a third. I volunteer, and I have a whole bunch of stuff going on, but I've always had kind of this W 2 thing, right? And that's true after I had my son because that was when I was like, I need to always have a stable kind of thing happening. But we've gotten rid of a lot of the unnecessary stuff in our life that people think they're risking as a result of, taking a risk on starting a business or whatever. I work and my wife doesn't. And that puts a huge hindrance on our finances, right? That's half of our income. but we don't see it as a risk because we just cut out all the extra stuff that doesn't really serve us, and we just know what we're capable of tolerating in our finances. And so that's a piece that a lot of people don't realize. There's one of the things that I'm branching off into that I kind of hinted at is financial coaching. And a lot of people think risk is highly tied with our financial stability, right? Like I can't risk that because what if I lose money? Is really what it all boils down to. Well, one of the questions I would have for you is how much money do you need? What is the risk? If I asked you how much money do you spend every month, could you tell me that answer? And if the answer is yes, okay, great. Do you have 3 to 6 months of finances saved up in the event of an emergency? If the answer is yes, then great. So what's the risk? That you could stop doing whatever it is you're doing for 6 months and still live exactly how you are now. You could probably afford to cut out the Starbucks and the the extra stuff. You could sell one of your extra cars that just sits in the lot because you needed it for summer. Like there's so many things you could do to even stretch that runway out a little bit. But risk would imply that you're at danger of something if something changes. And if you have stability in your finances, right, or in these other areas of your life, then it's not really a risk. But we don't know how to define risk. So we just think anything that happens that could be potentially bad is a risk and we're not willing to take it. So I think defining risk, both in terms of what we're willing to lose and not lose, but also in terms of what we're able to withstand versus what we're not able to withstand is a really important part of this conversation, that resiliency piece of stability, right? So stability, sorry to break this to the people who love stability, but there's no stable job. I don't know if you guys heard, the, the government's shut down right now. 800,000 people that have the most stable job in the world, judging by their sense, right? The US government are currently away without pay. And so I don't say that to scare anybody. I say that to say, assess what risk really means. Ask yourself, like, what is risk to me? Not what is risk to society, but what is risk to me? What is a danger? What is a stressor? What is something that could potentially happen that would take me away from what I currently have? That's a big piece of this whole conversation. And a little nugget to that we won't dive into too much just because of our time today, but is attachment to things, right? Like a lot of people are scared because they risk losing something because they're so attached to it. And I mean that both in terms of the physical things that we have, our house, our car, our stuff, our boat, or blah blah blah. We're attached to these things because they say something about us. We identify, I'm the person that has a boat. I'm the person that has a really fancy house. I'm a person that has a really nice car. And then we risk losing that, so we get scared to death of it. And that puts us in a whole mindset of scarcity and fear. And so that's one piece of it. But then there's also the attachment to the identity that we have associated with those things. And so if we can let go of some of those things, lo and behold, we recognize that a lot of the things that we think are risky are simply just uncommon. And it's uncommon because it's not common for people to not associate themselves with that type of fear, right? Everybody is associated with, I don't have enough money to buy these things that I want and that I need. But if you have, this could be an old statistic, but if you have $2,000 in your pocket or in your bank account, you are richer than half the population of the world. And yet we think millionaire is the status that we need to hit before we're successful in life, right? Like, so if you have $2,000 in your pocket, you're already at a lot less risk than half of the population of the world. It's like, what are we talking about here when we say risk? So that's my 7 cents. That is probably only worth two on the idea of risk versus stability, but it really boils down to how do you define it? How do you assess it? So for those of you who are like, yeah, but now what? My answer to that is like, sit down, whether it's financial risk that you're worried about, sit down, get a budget, figure out what your resilience is. If you don't have, I'm not yet a financial coach, but like if you don't, so take this for the grain of salt, ask your financial advisor. But if you don't have 3 to 6 months of your budget saved up, like your monthly expenses saved up in an emergency fund, that's your first goal. Like get there, right? $1,000 is actually the first goal. All right, just get $1,000 saved up somewhere, and then 3 to 6 months. And then if you don't have a budget, whoo, yeah, there it is, right there. There's your answer, right? You don't even know how much money you're supposed to be spending a month. That's the piece that you got to figure out. But you got to figure out what the risk is. And then you can extrapolate that to everything. Your physical risk, right? If you're 55 to 60 years old right now and you're not you're not resistance training in some way, shape, or form, boom. There's no other like I'll put a stake in the ground right now. That's your answer is resistance training. And I'm not talking 400-pound back squats on your vertebrae. Like I'm talking like 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down squats, 3 sets 20, and like something silly, easy that just means you're moving your muscles more than you are right now. But that's what de-risks your life, right? And then if you extrapolate that into your job, again, it's your job usually is associated with your financial risk. And so you just ask yourself, what am I able to tolerate? What am I able to do versus not do? And then de-risk the big one, de-risk your identity, right? Like let go of that identity that says, I'm not the type of person that starts a business. I'm not the type of person that I've had to do this for my finances. I don't like talking about money. I've had to disassociate myself from that identity. I'm not the type of guy that likes to talk about money, right? No, that's got to let that go. De-risk it. What if I start talking about money and everybody thinks I'm a fraud? Let it go, right? You can't help somebody else in something if you don't know it yourself and are willing to talk about it. So de-risking yourself by learning more about yourself, learning more about the topic, learn more about how much you're spending and how much you're getting. That's how you manage risk. Not by avoiding it, but by leaning into it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Of changing your perspective on risk and really assessing that is a huge thing to consider. Where is that balance for you? One more question. I think we have time for that.
But yeah, I'm not getting you in.
What strategies have you found most effective for building and maintaining strong professional or personal relationships, especially during times of transition or challenge?
Absolutely. So it's a little bit of a lengthy question. So I'm going to restate it in a different way and just kind of make sure that I'm comprehending it, Chris. And then you can correct me if I'm off base here. But what are some of the strategic step-by-step processes that we can use to engage in and develop social connections, especially when it comes time for transitions in our life, whether we're moving, getting a different job, things like that. Yeah.
Yep, yeah, and then just the lens of professional or personal relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think this is a multifaceted question because it always is, right? Because why would I make anything simple? Again, there are 8 different areas of our life. Why focus on just one at a time? Like I'm going to get a lot of friends, and I'm going to get a lot of money, then I'm going to get really fit. It's like, okay, like good luck not just completely burning out and hating your life trying to juggle 8 different things, right? But if we can associate, if we can integrate all of those things at once, now we're onto something. And that's what we try to do here in Next Better's ecosystem. So the first question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is the difference between professional and personal relationships? And at the end of the day, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Why? Because if you are who you authentically are, you're going to be the same person whether you're talking to a professional relationship or you're talking to a personal relationship. And I would argue that everybody in the world wants to be their authentic self. We don't want to have to pretend to be somebody we're not, nor should we. Now, that doesn't mean you get to be a jerk and be like, sorry about you, but Coach Woody said I can be unapologetically me. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you can be authentically you. You can still believe what you believe and have the values that you have, and you can still be a decent person. And so I'm going to answer the question about the social relationships after I talk a little bit about this other conversation, which I had with some students at Coffee with Coach I do every week. And it was this idea of like, they heard that being authentic was really, really important, but they're like, how can I be authentic in a world where I also have to be professional? And for one, it broke my heart because we have this gumption in us that we have to pretend to be someone we're not in order to be professional. And so the first thing we had to ask ourselves is, what does it mean to be professional? And so I asked them, you know, I want you to tell me what professional means. First thing is just to define it. What's professional mean? And what it really boiled down to is you don't curse. Like that's all they could really come up with. You don't curse, right? And so they couldn't really define it, but really it kind of came down to like, acting in a professional way, which isn't a definition, right? But acting in a different way that allows you to maintain an appearance of professionalism in a space that you want to be in, right? Like again, I don't even know how to define the stupid word because I think it's ridiculous, right? For me, what it really boils down to is you're you're treating and connecting with people with the means and the intent of trying to get something accomplished in your workplace. And I don't understand why anybody should have to pretend to be something they're not in order to accomplish that. Now, again, you may not curse as much, but that's also true if you're around children or the Dalai Lama, right? When you're around people that expect you to be a better version of yourself, you probably act like a better version. And the better version of you says, don't curse so damn much. And so it's not like being professional isn't really about being different. It's about just acting in a way that you feel would be appreciated by the other person, right? It really boils down to having some empathy. In this situation, cursing is probably not the right way to go about it. And so we talked a little bit about that. And then I asked him the question, I want you to think of some of the people you admire most or you connect most with in a quote unquote professional setting. And it really came down to like some mentors and professors that they have, right? And I asked, do they curse? And they're like, yeah, actually, when like when everybody's hair's down and things, I've cursed before, right? Like when I'm with a student because I recognize that they've probably heard their words before. But I asked them, like, like when we're behind closed doors and we're not in this, this setting where we don't know each other, do they curse? Yes. Okay. Do you think they're less professional because of that? Oh, no. No, I still respect them, admire them. Okay. So if professionalism is like putting on an air and not cursing, and these people have cursed, well, then you should think less of them as a professional, but you don't. So we know that professionalism isn't about pretending to be something we're not, right? It's simply being able to, again, put forward your best face in such a way that you make a good impression on other people. And it really kind of boiled down to this idea of making a good first impression, right? When I don't know how somebody responds to certain aspects of language or connections or joking or anything like that, well, then I'm probably not going to lead with, I'm going to, interrogate this person, or I'm going to talk down on them, or I'm going to joke with them, I'm going to curse with them. I do that with my buddies. I don't do that with people I just met. There's a reason for that because I've made a relationship with them and I connect with them. So really professionalism is more just about first impressions than anything else. Until I know that this person thinks it's okay to do those things, I'm not going to act that way. And that really just boils down again to empathy. And so I think the first step is to recognize that you shouldn't have to be anything other than you in any of those situations, but it doesn't mean you're being inauthentic because you don't curse in front of people in a professional setting. That just means you're not being a jerk, right? First impressions are important. Why? Because as a species, we want to connect with people. And in order to connect with people, we have to not be a jerk right off the bat because then they may not like us. And if they don't like us, then we get ostracized. If we get ostracized, bad things happen, right? Still an evolutionary, yes, exactly. Still an evolutionary trait from way, way back in the day. And so that just carries on. But again, that doesn't mean you have to fake anything. Gary Vaynerchuk, when he talks about it, he's like, I don't care if I curse. I don't care if my kids curse because I don't think that's what's going to make or break whether or not they're a good person who's successful in life. You can drop the F bomb and still be a good person, right? And so I think that's the first question in all of this is like, how do I make social connections between like my professional versus my personal life? Firstly, stop trying to separate them because the only thing you can do to separate those relationships is pretend to be two different people. You're either the real person in professional settings and the fake person in personal, or vice versa. Or you can be unapologetically you, right? Understand your direction in life, right? The directional well-being, understand my purpose and the values that I live by, right? Those are the things that I do not question. My values in life are purpose, betterment, responsibility, empathy, and gratitude. Whether you curse or not doesn't matter to me. If you whine about everything and don't appreciate the good things you have in life, you and I will not be friends. I'm not going to call you a bad person, but I don't associate with people who aren't grateful for things. Now you can complain. I complained to you right before we hopped on air. I said, man, I really don't want to do this. Right. But I'm still here. I'm still doing it because I have a responsibility. I said I was going to show up. And so I showed up. And that's one of my values. Right. Whether you curse or not is irrelevant. But if you aren't trying to better yourself, then again, we're probably not going to associate with each other. That, again, that doesn't make me better or worse than anybody. That just means what I care about. And so whether I'm in a personal setting or a professional setting, I'm looking for those values and I'm expressing those values. And so if somebody chooses, so when I go into those two different settings, I'm not a different person. And the more I understand who I am, the more I can be confident and comfortable in both of those settings. You aren't going to go to my classes and see some different dude. You're going to see me. If you come to my house, you're going to see a tired version of me, right? Maybe one that doesn't have to, put on good first impressions. I might curse a little bit more at my house, but you're not going to see a different dude because I am who I am. So I think that's one of the first aspects of this whole conversation that we need to recognize. Do you need to act differently in a professional setting? Probably. If you find yourself in a professional setting where they don't care about any of those things, it's one of the things I love about entrepreneurship. I can wear sweatpants and a t-shirt and nobody gives a damn, right? Like, ain't nobody out here caring because there are founders that are in sweatpants, there are founders that are in suits and jackets, and we're all just dudes trying to get things done. And so I have found a space where I fit in and I belong. And the world is getting more and more closer to that mentality because I think a lot of it has to do with like Zoom and COVID. And we saw our kids in the background and our dogs running amok. And we're just all out here doing our best. As Hannah, the girl who sat 2 seats back behind me in my massage therapy class once, she used to say that all the time. We're all just doing our best. And I don't know if she was, but I took that from her. Because I thought it was really cool that, like, yeah, we're all just out here doing our best. And so I think people have more and more come to appreciate and empathize with that, and we're starting to see these lines blurred. But yes, you can act differently in a professional setting versus personal setting and still be authentic to who you are, right? That's really important. But being authentic means you know what your values are, you know what your purpose is in life, and you're living by those things. Otherwise, you're always pretending until you know those things, right? You're either unconsciously living by them, which means you don't know when you are and are not, or you're just pretending to be somebody else because you don't know what you stand for. And so that's a really important aspect of all this. And then once you understand that foundation, we go back to the question at hand, which is how do you create strategies to develop those relationships, right? Again, first step is just knowing who you are. I have found that now that I know my values, and it took me a long time to develop those, by the way, now I start to see those in other people. I start to recognize gratitude and responsibility. It used to bother me when people complained about things. And now I realize why. They're either not being grateful or they're not taking responsibility. And again, that's okay, but I'm listening over and over. And if it was a bad day situation, okay, that's fine. Like, everybody has bad days. If this is just kind of the type of person they are, then I start to realize that's not somebody I'm going to associate with. And that's okay. And so that helps me in my relationships because I can start to see what I'm supposed to be looking for. So that's a strategy that I found to be very powerful. It's the long-term strategy. It's the hard one to do because it takes so long to figure out your own values. But once you do, it's just like you see the forest from the trees and you really start to see what's going on. But that's kind of the first step. But then there's other ways that you can do it. So the person I was working with that we had this conversation with, one of the things I started to say, well, like, they're going through a transition. And so kind of earlier in life, they would hang out at the bars and have drinks and yada, yada. And they started to realize that's just not the crowd they want to work with anymore. And so as they're moving, they're trying to figure out ways to be a little bit more intentional about that. And so the first thing I was like, okay, well, if drinking and partying and all those things aren't part of your values, right? That's using your environment to align with your values. Right? So where do you go instead? Well, if you're looking for someone who's a little bit more spiritually inclined, you might hang out at a church. If you're looking for somebody who's a little bit more focused on taking care of their bodies, you might hang out at the gym, right? If you want somebody who's a little bit more inclined to love nature, you might hang out at a park, right? So these are the things that you're doing if you don't know exactly what your values are, or you do, you align the spatial aspect of where you're going with the directional aspect of your life. You go to these places and you start to associate with those people. So that's another thing is hanging out in the right places. And then the last thing is social connections only occur when you actually communicate with other people. And so I'm not going to recommend the dating apps and the social aspects because I don't know what they are. I didn't live in that era. eHarmony was just becoming a thing. as I was dating. I had to do the old fashioned thing of seeing a pretty girl across the way and saying, "Hey, do you want to go out sometime?" Right? And so there's probably apps out there. There's a lot of uncertainty about whether or not they're successful because a lot of apps pair you on interests and similarities. But if I was paired with somebody who was like me, we would both kill each other. So it's actually turning out not to be the truth that you should find somebody exactly like you, but you should find somebody that complements you. And some of the apps are getting this wrong. But no matter what, you should be connecting with them and communicating with them. So this is the tip. This is the hot trick. If I was clickbaiting you right now, I would say this is the number one biohack that has allowed me to instantly transform my businesses and my professional life forever. X blah blah blah. Right. And so this is the trick that I use to connect with people. Kristin, are you ready? All right. So I'm going to ask you a question, then you're going to have to respond to the question like you normally would with any human being. Cool. All right. Here we go. I know. Look at you. You're like, I
Yes.
don't know. How do I normally respond? Right. So the question is, hey, Kristin, how are you today?
Mm. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. What makes you good today?
Mm.
I'm going to pause you right there because you immediately had to start to think, okay, I gave him a response. It probably wasn't an intentional, conscious response. It was probably the same crap that I give everybody because what I've been conditioned to do is just answer the question with a general good, fine, well, great, okay, right?
You've
And
got me every time asking that question. Every time.
exactly. And I do this with my students, and you would be amazed how quickly a group of strangers goes from never talking to like the loudest, most boisterous room of humans communicating, just like that, right? A stranger, they're talking to a complete stranger. They happen to be in the same class, so there's some similarities. We're college students, we're in the same class, blah blah blah, but complete strangers. And what happens is there's two aspects to that trick, that hack that make it so impactful. One is a pattern disruptor because people aren't ready for you to actually care how they are. So it disrupts the pattern. Like, oh, I said good, but then he asked me a follow-up question. Like, I wasn't ready for this. I thought I was just supposed to say good because that's what everybody says. So it disrupts the pattern of what you're normally able to do or normally willing to share or interested in sharing or usually share. The second part, and this is where it really becomes powerful, is it introduces curiosity. There is no human on this earth that doesn't want to connect to some other human in some way. We are hardwired for it. Now, you might be an introvert. You might be nervous and scared to talk to another human, a stranger. And the reason is introverts are not people who do not make good connections. In fact, they make much better connections than extroverts like me. But they take longer to find trust in people. So small talk doesn't work very well. But even introverts, when asked, what makes you good today, will perk up. Why? Because another human cares enough to ask. So you have this pattern disruptor and you have this curiosity, and everybody wants to talk about themselves. I don't care how altruistic you are. Everybody would like to talk about themselves, right? And so you have these two things that just been so powerfully together. And so then you ask the question, what makes you good today? And so, Kristin, how would you respond to that today? Being completely honest.
I saw a beautiful sunrise and have been able to, yeah, focus more on finding a lot of joy out of the little things in life again, which I haven't felt in a while. So it feels good to not have to have some big, massive achievement to feel joy again.
I love that. And I love that for you. Right. And so that can take on so many different directions. If you have somebody that you're more connected with and you feel a little bit more comfortable, like me and you, I would be asking, like, what's changed? What happened? What made it to where you can feel that joy? And we could go down that rabbit hole. If you don't know this person and you're not comfortable going down that rabbit hole, you can simply say, I'm really happy for you that you found some joy in that sunrise. Good for you. Right? You don't have to take it any farther than that. But simply doing that one little step opens up the door to connect more meaningfully with people. And so I've seen this play out time and time again. There are so many connections that I don't know exactly where they're going to go, but I can tell you that a majority of the people that I've connected with, it starts as simple as that. It starts as simple as just being willing to ask a question or go up and thank somebody. because they did something nice, something small, right? Like there's a gentleman by the name of Brian Lord. He's a Purdue graduate. He came and he started like 11 companies. You can look him up on LinkedIn, Lord Lord, and he came and gave a professional talk, like a panel at Purdue Innovates, where we do entrepreneurship at Purdue. And he was on the panel, and I heard him talk about how he was a part of the program that I now teach in. And so after the panel was over, I never met this guy from Steve, right? But after the panel was over, he was standing in the back of the crowd, and I just walked up to him. Now, ironically, one of my students from 2 semesters ago also walked up, so I had to wait in line after my student. And I thought that was just hilarious. I'm like, yeah, good for you, buddy. Like, you did what I told you to do, which is go and connect and ask questions and be curious. And so he was there. And so I waited my turn, and then I went up to him. And I said, "Hey, Brian, just wanted to say thank you for taking the trip from California to come out here and speak to us. I know from experience that people like yourself who have been in these seats make so much more of an impact to these students than anybody else possibly could. So I just want to say thank you." And so we got to talking a little bit because I was appreciative of him. I asked questions. I was, curious. I didn't ask for anything from him. I didn't ask for favors. I didn't ask, what can you do for me? I simply asked questions about him. And so he shared those things. And at the end of it, he said, hey, if you ever need a guest speaker or want some help, let me know. I'm happy to help. Like, hey, great, perfect. He went back to California. A month goes by. I connected with him on LinkedIn. I said, "Hey, Brian, it's me again. Just wanted to say, hey, thanks again for coming out. I really appreciate it. You mentioned that you would be interested in guest speaking. I know you're in California, so if there's any opportunity, I'd love to make that happen. Just let me know your thoughts." And he said, "You got time for a Zoom call?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we hopped on a Zoom call, and within 5 minutes, we had it all planned out. I had talked to this man who has started 11, 12 companies, very successful, sold one for multiple millions of dollars, for a total of 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, all I did was ask questions and showed gratitude. And because of that, he was willing to fly halfway across the country to come and speak to my classes and pour into them, right? So it really just boiled down to being willing to talk, being curious, and being grateful. And then obviously, you don't just walk up to somebody and be like, "Hey, can you come talk to my class?" You gotta recognize there has to be an exchange of value in some way. In every relationship, there's an exchange of value. Whether you're gonna marry the person, whether you're gonna work with them on a team, whether you're gonna buy something from them, in which case the value is money, or you're gonna ask something of them, in which case their value is time. There always has to be an exchange of value. But when you can see that value exchange, and when you can understand what it is that they may be valuing, that's when, and that comes from the curiosity, right? Asking them questions, seeing what they're all about, what they need and what they want. Then you can start to align those aspects of value. And so whether that's, again, a personal connection or a professional connection, that sense of asking questions and being curious and learning more is so powerful. And you can't go into it wondering what you're going to get from it. But I can promise you, if you go into it with curiosity and a willingness to learn, and maybe, just maybe, to give a little bit, you're going to get so much more that comes back from that experience. And so that's my 2 cents on how do we make strategic decisions on how to network with people. Is first knowing your value so you know what to look for in others, and then setting yourself up in the right spaces so that you are connecting with people that are like-minded or like-interested, and then taking the time to actually connect, like speak to them, ask them questions, connect with them. And then it's always helpful if you leave with a way to stay connected. Mine right now is LinkedIn, right? If I find any interest in what we have to offer each other, you can better believe I'm going to ask to connect on LinkedIn.
I love it. Curiosity, empathy, gratitude, surround yourself with good people. Awesome.
Just some
Awesome. Awesome.
universal truths.
We went a little bit over time, but those were two really great questions and really great 7-cent answers.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah. So, like I said, we're shortening it up a little bit, guys. So that's the end of this episode. As always, we're trying to take all these different 8 areas of our life: our physical, spiritual, mental, our social, vocational, material, our directional in the middle, and our spatial on the outside, and figure out how do we better ourselves in all these areas, preferably with smaller amounts of decisions that ultimately impact a lot of different aspects. And so that's what we talked about today. So, Kristin, thank you so much for posing such phenomenal questions and giving such awesome insights as well.
Thank you for your answers.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. Very grateful for you to have you in my lives. Until next time, my name is Coach Woody with Kristin Rinkel. You make it a great day.